Hi, everybody. So today, Ray and Anya are here with me today, and we are going to talk about a lot of different things. I made a list this time.
Good.
We're going to start with words. So a lot of us, we have different phrases that we use, and we have different words that we use, and then somebody else will not understand what we're talking about. So we're kind of going into a period of time where we're getting ready for telepathy, I think, but we're misunderstanding each other a lot. So words are kind of a interesting thing. And they're also spells. So words are spells in the English language. Yeah.
And that's why they call it spelling.
Yes.
No, and the thing is, I completely agree with this, and I think it's something we're all navigating and learning. But I struggle in this like community sometimes. I'm like, well, what can you say? You can't say believe. I have to be like not knowing and mourning, and there's so many things that you have to like consciously correct, which is absolutely fine. But in the process of doing that, in the transition of that, change your intention towards it as well. So as you like rewiring your brain, I think just changing the intention towards the words is a really powerful thing that you can do, because you change the vibration of it and how it's received. So as we're transitioning through like changing the words we use completely in as language and to communicate and via minds and emotion, I think that's a good thing to do, is just set the intention of what you're trying to say with the vibration of when you're saying it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. And just being mindful of just specific phrasing. I saw someone post something where I was on TikTok and I got real deep in the comments on this post because I was curious if other people were noticing what I noticed. So she posted in the thing, she goes, just did like a 6-mile run. I earned this meal, and did a video of her cooking a really delicious meal. And the emoji she did was like the crying, sad, like that little face, the emoji. So there was someone who commented like, really good for you. The food looks amazing. Proud of you for your workout. But just a reminder, you don't ever need to earn a meal. You are allowed to eat like just for existing and being alive. But everyone like got all mad and was like, that's not what she meant. That's not what she meant. That's not what she meant. And I'm like, but that's what she said. That's what she said. So we have to take that into account. Maybe that isn't what she meant, but that is what she said. So maybe that is what she meant. So it's just important to say what you mean. It's important to choose our words wisely.
Yeah. And I think as a psychic medium or a channeler, most people will know if you experience that. Like sometimes you mean to say something and something else completely comes out of your mouth, and usually it's not what you thought about saying, but it's exactly what needed to be said, or the way it needed to be delivered, or the message, the interpretation. And I think sometimes it is just kind of, trusting into what you're trying to achieve out of something, even just out of words, like what is the purpose of cooking that meal? What do you want to receive from it? What intention, what vibration can you put over that activity, that energy of doing the washing up, of doing the daily things? How can we transmute this into something that's benefiting us on an energetic level,
Well, and sometimes people say something because that's the way they're used to saying it, but they're not meaning it to be negative. Whereas the other person will maybe take it as negative and then go in for the kill,
Right.
And like be really upset about it. And the other person's like, whoa, I don't know what I said to make you upset.
Right.
So being tolerant, I think right now is important too, because there's a lot of misunderstandings going on.
And that's like the worst. That's why I hate texting. I hate having deep conversations over text, because you just can't relay the energy or the emotion or the tone from a robotic text. Like you just can't express that through that. So yeah, I think it's really clear.
Yeah, that's part of what it is to be human, right? Is we have an interpretation, a filter. When someone's speaking, we have the cultural context, the nuance of their body language, the tone, the how were they raised, like what's like somebody's word choices could be very different depending on all of those factors, like their gender, their religion, all of that. Like basically, that's why I think one of the coolest things about humans is that we can understand people that don't speak our language. You know, like if you go to another country, you can learn if you're present enough and paying close enough attention and looking at the details, you can usually communicate at least like decently enough to find out where to go or find the bathroom or whatever, you know. But that's just such a cool thing that giving each other that, but you can only do that when you give each other grace and when you have no judgment, and when you're just like, okay, this is a cool experience, wow, we don't speak the same language, but like we're trying to communicate the same thing, so let's see how we can do this. Like it's like a game and it's fun. It doesn't have to be like a battle of like, no, you need to, this is what I'm, you know, you need to think of it like this. It's like, well, we're saying the same thing practically, you know, like just being kind of, the thing is though, I do have to say that doesn't always work. Because I gave grace like that to my family for years and years and years and years and years, trying to explain to them like, you believe in God and I believe in God and this is how it's really the same, and they're just like, no, it's not the same. And finally I just gave up and said, okay, you're right, the God that you believe in is definitely not the same God that I believe in. So now that we agree on that, I'll see you later. Just, like, not that you can't be friends with someone that you don't believe the same God, but like their beliefs are so drastically different from mine that we just can't. Yeah.
It might be vibrational though, too. Like you just can't come together if somebody's in a lower vibration and what they believe is
like when you're speaking to someone with a different language and they're coming from heart space, you're connecting on an energetic level. It doesn't matter what words you're saying, your energies are connecting. You can communicate with hands. Like I was doing it in Morocco. I was like, anyone, cigarettes, you know, everyone knew what I was trying to say, or money or cash machine. It's all about the energetic exchange where you're coming from the heart space. And when you're being present in your body and being connected in with your being and their being, you're going to have communication easily. It's when they're not connected in with their own self, when they're disconnected from their own being and disconnected from their own true self. How can you connect in from your true self to theirs when it's completely disconnected from themselves? You know, that I think that's where the difference.
Yeah, what you just said, the heart center, when you're communicating, because what you just said is when you don't speak the same language, you communicate from the heart center. So if somebody's heart center is blocked, if they're not in tune with their own heart, then then you literally are not able, you're pushing the energy and it's just reflecting off of them, like it's not even going into their field really.
Yeah.
So if you speak the same language or a different language, it really doesn't matter. They're not resonating with the frequency that you're emitting, and you're not resonating with theirs.
Well,
so it's like,
yeah, so that's why when you are around people you don't speak the same language, you naturally grab it because your heart is if you're a heart-centered person, your heart will guide you to another heart-centered person where you're going to be able to communicate. You know, it's like, so if we trust our heart, you know, cliche, right? We trust our heart, you know.
Exactly.
But it's true, you know, when I had such anxiety going to Morocco because I traveled on my own. I don't really travel much places on my own, especially not across the bloody world. And you know, I got there and I had no idea where I was going. I got a taxi with the airport and after the airport, and I just trusted. I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to make it safely, and I just know that I'm where I need to be, and the universe is going to keep me safe. And I'll be guided. And the taxi man was absolutely lovely. He was hilarious. He had the music on. He was like, you can smoke in the car. It's cool, you know. He was such a cool guy. And it was just like the connections and the energy that was built in just trusting and just flowing with it instead of vibrating from fear and panic and anxiety, and just really truly trusting that I'm capable, the universe is capable, and I'm protected. And just rolling with it, like, and that's what I did, and it brought such joy rather than such a stress. So it's a nice change.
Good for you. That's good. That was a power moment right there.
It was a power moment. It took a lot, but we got there in the end. It was good. And then I had a little meltdown the next day, and then Honey and Abby was there. I was like, help me, please. But it was great. We had a great time. I'm glad I had all my little emotional meltdowns before the desert, because when I got in the desert, I was like, this is cool. I'm cool. I was cool in the desert. But what a beautiful trip. But yeah, words, man. Hopefully, when you come in from the heart space, we don't even need words.
Exactly. Exactly. So what about the third eye versus the 3D?
Oh, yes, okay.
So
Yeah,
the
because
yeah.
Yeah, because we've got so many people now that are coming online. I mean, everyone's having the earrings and the headaches and the third eye pressure. So everyone's going to be, or multiple people at least, are going to be experiencing some form of clairvoyance, some form of natural intuition-based visions. Um, using that sense of third eye to be able to connect in to see other things, whether that's spirits, fairies, all the beautiful magical things, because now the darkness is being removed nearly down to none. As the vision's expanding, we're not going to be exposed to the level of darkness visually that has been around in the auric field over the past millennia, whatever many years.
Yeah.
So it's about now that it's the opportunity for us to tap into these natural abilities that we've all already had, but it's either not being safe to use, or they've been physically and emotionally blocked from being accessible. So as we're accessing the natural abilities of vision in the dream state, in meditation, and then that's going to navigate is into waking mode and into waking mind. And I think that it's just really important to have quite a couple of different things to do. So first of all, have people that are either online or close that you have some form of ability to communicate with them. Find groups online, get in contact with people, and just so that you can actually have a conversation. Because the main thing is making sure that you remember that we are all going through this. You're not just going insane, because that is the one big thing that I think every person in this world has thought one time, like, is this just in my mind? What the fuck's going on? So I think there is a moment where we have that experience. So I think it's important to remember that as people experiencing this expansion of vision, either in the third eye or the real eyes, to be around people that have either experienced this or are experiencing this, so that you have some form of communication and support, so that you're not alone throughout this journey. And there's so many different ways that might happen. There's like the blurred vision going on, the eyes stinging, the burning in the eyes, there's so many adjustments going on, and they shouldn't last for too long, but they are all ascension symptoms, adjustments, and allowing the eyes to activate on the level that the consciousness is functioning at. I don't think it's just going to be boom overnight, everyone's just going to start seeing spirits. I think it's going to be some more than others faster, like it has been before, and then it's going to be an expansion of that. But I think it's just really important to kind of feel safe in what we're doing here, and just to have support. I think that's so important, to just have the safety support, working with crystals, working with nature, working with your spirit guides, working with your higher self, and just asking in for that healing and that support, and knowing that you're not alone if you're experiencing this.
Yeah.
I think it's normal to feel like you're going crazy, like way more than just one time.
Yeah.
It is.
Right.
Like, I've been feeling that way for like this last week. This last week, I've had a couple of those thoughts of like, is this all, am I just part of a weird cult? Like, did I just fall into another cult? And now I'm just like thinking that I'm better than everyone else. I was just really questioning myself, like making sure that I'm like having integrity and a pure heart, and I'm being honest with myself, right? And truly like have I seen any evidence, right? Have I seen any evidence? And yes, no, I have not seen physical evidence necessarily, but as far as like the testimonies of people that are like, I saw the same thing, or I received the same information, or after you worked on me, I actually had changes, like things like that. So it's important, I think, to just hold on to the things that make you remember that this is real. Whatever those memories are for you, or those things that you're like, no, when that happened, that was that moment, like I knew. And then you gain this whole collection of memories, and then anytime you freak out, you're like, wait, no, go to my memory bank. Okay, yes, these are all the things that, oh yes, okay, all these things have happened over the last few years that have proven to me that this is real, so I have no reason to doubt logically or any other way. Like, this is all good.
Yeah. To me, it's
So,
like
And it is.
bringing the bodies together, the emotional body and the the brain, what is that called? The
Mm.
the body that
intellectual body?
houses the logic, that
The intellectual
together.
body.
Yeah, the intellectual body, bringing those together is like huge. And
Yeah.
also being willing to kind of, because the other part of the question is, how do we kind of flow with everything? How do we let that intuition guide us into the next step for the 3D life? Which we're moving into the 4D
Right.
life.
Well,
So I don't know if I want to call it the 3D life anymore.
I am so disconnected from the 3D life.
no,
I don't
because
even
it's not.
know.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what? I'm really glad you said that, Ray, what you was just talking about then, because I struggle, you know, like I've not questioned my role in as a psychic, as a medium, very, very, very rarely. It wasn't until I got kind of thrown into this deeper world recently in the past few months, and I kind of got exposed to multiple different people that I really like had resonance with, and then seen it. I was like, wow, that's completely the opposite of what I thought. And it really made me question, like, are we in a cult? Are we all fucking mental? And I had this whole meltdown, and it really was the remembrance. I just looked up at the stars as I was outside, and I kind of had this remembrance of what I felt, of what I felt throughout all this time. And I think as we're navigating through this shift into the 4D positive, it's really remembering, because the one thing is to remember, and me and Trish were talking about this, my business partner, like she has a lot of vision. She's seen a lot throughout 2019, 2020. So when she questioned it the other day, when she had a full blown, like, I really didn't help. She's doing everything going, oh, we're all mental. And I'm going, yeah, no, not yet. It's, you know, I really didn't help at all, because I think I needed to get out too. I needed to understand that we all have experiences, and that it's okay to have that moment, no matter how deep you are in this, and go, hang the flip on, are we actually, you know, this time next year, what is this going to look like? When I'm telling people what I know about the dome and the dragons and the angels and the spirits and the veil dropping, and then they're like, right, so next March, next April, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And then it's that reality that hits home, that this is real, and this is physically going to transition. And I think it's remembering how we felt, the support from us guides, the support from spirit, the support from the universe, the times where we've just laid in nature and felt such peace and happiness and clarity, and look at where we were when we started this journey in terms of emotional healing and respect for ourselves and self-love and boundaries, and then seeing that transition and looking that only positive things have come out of that for our own health and well-being, and that can't be a negative. And if they're going through that journey themselves, and they've been through that whole transition, and now it's they've been through the ups and downs, they're getting to a better place. No matter where we are mentally, it's looking at the progress and the journey that you've got to, and just navigating through that moment will pass. That moment of panic and fight or flight will pass. It's just about, I laughed it off. I literally just laughed. I literally laughed for it. Me and Trisha laughed, and then just got back to normal. I was like, all right, off we go then.
For all my like logical friends out there, the more open your third eye becomes, the crazier shit you're gonna see and be aware of. So of course, the crazier shit that you see, you're more likely to think that you're crazy, because it's way out of the norm. But that's just, the more awake you get, the more aware you get, you're going to be exposed to way weirder stuff. So like you said, as a practitioner, I think for me, as a practitioner, I've evolved a lot in the last year. Like I'm doing things now that I didn't even know were possible. I'm doing things even a couple months that I couldn't do a couple months ago. You know, it's like the evolution is happening so fast that it's easy to kind of be like, wait, this is all happening so fast. Am I sure that it's almost like when you're starting to go so fast, you're like, wait, this is going to be really hard to like change course. If I want to change course, I would have to change course now, or else I'm going to be like forever in this thing and in this cycle that I have to complete. Right. So, you know, before you start the cycle, there is a chance you jump out. But once you're in the midst of the cycle, you have to complete it, and there's no way, like, there's no shortcut. You just got to keep going down the tunnel. But yeah, so I think it's natural for a lot of us to be experiencing that kind of like, okay, this is your last chance. And like, you really got to make sure, if you really truly believe in your heart that this is true and real and what you're doing matters, and right, like, But yeah, I mean, the third eye, man, it's definitely opening up. And yeah, I saw some weird shit the other night in my house, but also I was drinking. I don't usually drink, but it was when my parents were here and that whole fiasco. But I was laying on my laying and just looking up, just looking up in my ceiling and just like my eyes were just kind of unfocused. But I could see a lot of like I don't even know. I was like zooming. It was like I was focusing in and out of this other dimension with all these little flying creatures flying all around my house. And I'm like, was it the Fae? But I don't know if it was the Fae, but yeah, it was crazy. It was just creatures everywhere. I'm like, what is pretty cool.
It's good though, because pretty soon a lot of people are going to start to see that kind of stuff. And it's going to
Yeah.
become
Mhm.
very relevant that we've been through it and can say, oh, you're fine. It's okay.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
normal. You're just,
Yeah.
your third eye is opening up and you're just going to be fine. Just don't get worried about it. Just let it flow.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And like you say, like when I first started opening up my third eye and started to like see visions and see spirit and things like that, like that was a big deal. And now it's literally it's just like go making toast for breakfast. It's just a normal day-to-day activity in life. So you become so normalized to these things that then you start seeing extra dimensionals or past lives and that you like Ray says, you can start to handle more. There is no way that when I started reading tarot cards, I could have done past life extra dimensionals. However, the more you can learn, the more you handle, the more normalized it becomes in your life. And that'll be the same thing that happens for them, just in maybe a faster way. So the more like, and also us not panicking. So when someone comes up to us and goes, "Oh my God, I just seen a spirit," I'll be like, "Oh, cool, mate. What did they look like? What did they want to say?" There's no, "Oh my God, what did you?" It's not the fear-based panic reaction that's going to trigger them to react in panic and fear. If they're exposed to people that have had an understanding of it, then we're going to be able to make them feel a lot calmer, have understanding, navigate through that journey with ease. Because a lot of us can teach and train other people. That's what we do, so that we can help other people navigate through that journey with ease, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
whole
and looking at them as if they're a child too. I think one of the things that we don't think about is the inner child for most people is not nourished. The inner child hasn't experienced what we would want it to. So
right.
if you can look at them and treat them with the unconditional love that you would give to a child as they're going through that process, then I think it's a lot easier. The whole thing becomes so much easier because you're not judging anything else.
Right.
We're just supporting them through it. We're not doing it for them, but you're saying, oh, that's fine. It's okay. What did you see?
Well,
Patient.
I think it's also
Well,
important to distinguish between like what's the difference between seeing something with your third eye, your imagination, and your real eyes. So the imagination is a place where you can see things. Okay, the imagination is the place where your own fears distort things that you see. Okay, so your third eye is you see things with your third eye. So an image will come into your mind or a flash or something, right? And then it goes to the imagination. And then the imagination, if you have a lot of fear, if you have a lot of triggers, if you have a lot of repressed phobias, things like that, the imagination is going to completely run with that image that you received, right? So that's why it's so important to come to terms with our fears, and like that's why so many of us have been doing that for so long. But my whole point is that the imagination is not the same as the third eye, but it is very connected. So there is a difference, but in the beginning, just remember to let go of the fear. Anytime that you see anything or think you see something, remember that there's nothing to fear. Literally, there's nothing to fear. If it was there to hurt you, you wouldn't be allowed to see it. I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to see it. It would seek it would intentionally hide itself from you so it could hurt you. But if it's showing itself to you, typically that means there is some sort of opportunity there to connect that could benefit both of you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So, um, we all kind of agreed and have tuned into the fact that the solar flash is happening in March, right? However, the other day I saw a
Early
little
April.
video, and it was a mom talking about her 4-year-old that said, "Oh, before Christmas, Mom, everybody's going to remember who they are. They're going to start to remember who they are." And I'm paraphrasing, but I was like, who do you want to listen to? You want to listen to the kids because they're so tapped in. And what does that actually mean? So I tuned into it, and it's the edge of the solar flash is beginning in December. So what
Mhm.
is the solar flash to me? It's light codes and information and beautiful things, right? And awakening. It has nothing to do with destruction. So the solar flash begins in December, culminates in March. So in March is the strongest part of the solar flash, and then begins to dissipate into June. And
Mhm.
then I think the residue of it basically even moves into July a little bit.
Even maybe early
So
August,
we're
like
into
the
this huge awakening period.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's about to happen, which means a lot of people are going to be really confused.
Mm. And
Yeah.
feeling very like, there's the physical, we've got the physical detoxing and upgrading, the emotional detoxing and upgrading, the spiritual emotional detoxing and upgrading. And it's like all these different multifaceted layers to our being, our soul, our fractals, our past lives, our soul contracts, karmic bonds, releasing all this energy and shifting it out subconsciously so that the physical vessel and the emotional vessel is ready to download and receive. That is a lot. It can be it can be intense, whether that's physically, emotionally. I've been really sensitive and emotional, and a lot of things that I hadn't even thought about for a long time, like insecurities and things that I don't consciously presently have in my life, have come up from years ago. So it's obviously subconscious patterns that need to be acknowledged and released and separated off so that they're not there in the subconscious energy field to recreate new patterns in the future, to be re-triggered again. So there's a lot of things that are coming up, and it's just really important not to judge yourself for it and not to have judgment that I've already dealt with that. Why is that coming back up? It's like, no, it's just the leftovers. Just let it come out and just let it go, instead of stressing over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about connecting with people, and but I just wanted to mention, like, to be kind and listen to yourself and listen to your body, listen to your intuition. But really, truly, I think right now our bodies are really speaking to us. Like, if you're tired, try to take a nap. If you can take a nap, if you have the ability to take a nap, take a nap. Like, if you have the ability to say no to a social function so you can rest, do that. Like, I just don't force ourselves to connect just for the sake of connecting, but also don't force yourself to isolate if you want to connect. It's really whatever is right for you right now. And for me, it fluctuates a lot. So I hope everyone knows that's normal. Like, it's normal to fluctuate between like 3 or 4 days of being alone, and then like a couple days of wanting to talk to people nonstop. Like, it is what it is. No judgment. Don't judge yourself. Just honor what feels right in that moment or on that day, or.
Yeah.
I've been sleeping a lot and doing a lot of resting, and the guilt does come up and the shame does come up. You're not doing enough. You're the reason why the ascension is slowing down. Like, right? Like, literally those thoughts, as a healer, as a practitioner, as a leader of New Earth, that is something that comes to my mind. Oh, you're not fulfilling your tasks and doing your roles. So that's why things are off the timeline. That's why the timeline's off. So that is everyone's going to have their own version of that imposter syndrome or guilt trip, shame trip. So just be aware and know that that's going to try to get you down, but it's a lie. So you just listen to your body and honor and trust your body.
Yeah. I think this is a good time to bring up what trauma really is too. So a
Definitely.
lot of people, their trauma, it's only what you perceive it to be. So your trauma could be somebody stole a toy and you perceive it as big trauma, or it could be something really, hard that happened. but you're still perceiving it, trauma is what you make of it, really. And it's what you've made of it at the time.
Yeah, and the age of the soul experiencing the thing
Yeah.
also dictates how traumatic it is, because someone taking a toy from a very young soul could be extremely traumatic, just the same as someone stealing someone's car, like it could be equal depending on their experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, like no one's pain is more, obviously certain things are more consciously traumatic to go through. However, that is not a comparison of how that impacted you just because someone else had something that impacted them in a different way. Like, I think this is such a valid thing right now, because for us to navigate into them extra abilities and feeling more connected to source and direct, the dogs are back and you're gonna have to, I apologize in advance, the little shites. But yeah, I think it's so important because trauma is simply a pattern that had been created out of like you say, not being seen, not being heard. I mean, it could be simply that your parent was trying to cook tea for you and didn't want you to get burned, and you're trying to then show them a picture, and they didn't mean to not see your picture. They didn't want you to get burned, but you didn't know that as a child, and you took that as, oh my god, no one wants to see my stuff, so I'm never going to show anyone again. And it's these very small, tiny little defense mechanisms that are created out of his body feeling, I do not feel comfortable feeling like that. This was not a good experience. So how can I prevent that happening again? So we have defense mechanisms and trauma responses that are then built from these tiny, teeny experiences and bigger experiences, and even just observing people in their own pain. Like my family, there's a lot of people with depression, anxiety, and I became hyper vigilant to observing people's emotions and knowing what mood and what vibration they were in at what time, so that I would not be in any consequence to their mood. So I think it's so important to then understand how that's become a trauma response. Probably why I'm so bloody good at reading people now. I'm really good at it. So it's that direct connection to being able to just understand where that comes from, and that's not blaming anyone. I think this is so important. My therapist taught me that you are not blaming someone because you're identifying the fact that your needs wasn't met. They brought the best that they were capable of at that time, and that's maybe not always the what you needed. However, it's not saying, oh, that's their fault. It's about acknowledging, I didn't get what I needed, they brought the best of that, and we can meet in the middle, because sometimes people with great upbringings, a lot of love in the home, struggle to identify where the trauma is, because they look back and go, oh, I was loved, I had no problems, no abuse, nothing, why would I have trauma? I fell into that category. And it's simply observing the fact you can be loved and held in different ways, but then have needs that was not met in terms of stability, structure, financial support, or respect, or hearing your words in different ways. So there's so many different layers to trauma. And if the word trauma triggers, you just change it. Just find it as defense mechanisms or pain points, something that is a different.
Yeah, it goes back to words like we were talking about earlier. And I think the stigma that comes along with the word trauma, a lot of people don't want to see themselves as a victim. So they're like, I don't have trauma. I'm not a victim. I'm a strong, empowered. But it's like, well, you are strong and empowered. Like you just said, maybe if the word trauma doesn't feel right for you, you can use the word like, oh, I don't even know, just whatever word feels right for you. But the point is trauma is not as big of a deal as, when we think of trauma, we think extreme, but trauma is not actually extreme. It's really just a duality. It's like, oh, this, I expected this to happen as a child. This did not happen. And then I had a negative reaction to that. And then I had an expectation going forward that if this happened, I labeled that experience as, oh, if this happens, then that means I'm going to be sad again. Right. So trauma is not actually a dramatic, right? Like you said, it starts as this little, but if it doesn't get addressed soon enough, then it grows into this big thing. So.
Yeah.
And then it gets like built upon, like guaranteed every single one of us, most of us that were consciously awake, have trauma from the whole, I don't even want to say the word, but the whole sea situation that happened between 2019 and 2021. Because the second I'm then, in a environment where I'm like told what I can't, I'm like, oh, the fear, the panic that it triggers. And I acknowledged that the other day, of the fear of being suffocated or like locked in, that came up, and it really triggered some trauma in me. And I thought, where does this come from? And I realized it's not from childhood, it's not from even early years, it's literally from 2 years ago. And I completely diminished the fact that because I was living in fight or flight survival mode, wake everybody up, I didn't actually acknowledge my own fear, pain, anxiety that I was experiencing, and I just shoved it down. And that was re-triggered by a very small comment that someone made, and I was like, whoa, you're not bringing that near me. And I knew my reaction was extreme, and that's why I knew straight away what is that in me. And it is so important to acknowledge that, you know, it can be school, it can be work, it can be society. A lot of trauma is created by societal norms, judgment, restrictions, pressure, fear of authority, you know, this pressure to go to an establishment every single day for 6-7 hours a day where you don't want to fucking go learn shit you don't want to do. That whole pressure, that creates trauma from a very young age. It's taking away your choice, your freedom, asking when you need to go to the toilet, asking when you need to use your own body. Like, these things are creating trauma in child's mind before you're even talking about their upbringing and the friends and the abusive partnerships or whatever else happened. You know, this is why we have so much layers to move through that will never be healed. We're on a healing journey, and that's the whole point. You know, you healers that sit there and go, I'm healed. I'm like, you know, sorry, but I personally don't think that anyone is fully healed, because there's layers to trauma we can't deal with at that time that will come up later on. It's all layered in because we deal with it at different times, you know.
Healing
To be
onion.
fully
In my-
healed is to be one with source. I mean,
Then
so
we'd be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think another thing to address is there may be more trauma happening soon, and how you take it in is going to be, you know, how you experience it. Because I want to talk about the population a little bit, because not everybody's going to be staying on the planet in their body as we go through this process. And that can either be traumatic, or it can actually be, you realize that they're free to do something else. And
Right.
yeah, so I think that's important to discuss too, because how we look at it is how we're going to experience it.
well, yeah, like just honoring that there is a balance to the universe and there is fairness, and honoring the fact that if they are taken, as far as like if their vessel can't handle it and they do die, it's because number one, their vessel would be suffering way too much if they were to stay. Their vessel, they would be in torture and torment, like they would eventually die anyway. And then the other thing is that their soul agreed to this. Their soul already knows that this is about to happen. So
Mhm.
even if they're not consciously aware of it, it's something they've agreed to. We all come here because we choose to, and we've agreed to come here. There is no victimhood here, no one that was just sent here, you know. So it's just trusting that they have their own higher self, they have their own guidance system, they have their own soul path, their own soul plan, their own lessons. And like Honey said, it's going to be better for them. It's freedom for them. They're not going to be stuck somewhere where they won't know what's going on, and they'll be lost and confused and like in pain. And, you know, so their soul will still live on. That's the whole thing. And they may even come back into a new vessel almost immediately. So a lot of souls that leave, they may go and be like, oh shit, I almost made it. I was so close. Let me just get a new vessel that is more capable of handling the light codes, and they'll jump back in. So we don't really have to worry. It's all for the best. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important that what you've just said, because me last week needed to hear that. You know, I spoke to Honey a lot about this because I think it's my own personal trauma with grief. I've not actually personally lost my granddad passed when I was young, but my family carry a lot of grief, and I kind of inherited that. So my experience with grief was intense. So for something or someone to die in me was like, no, worst case scenario, you know, it's like such trauma. And I think I was then associating that on a collective level, and also processing, you know, collective constructs of grief and how we perceive grief, and how we've had that because we lived in a 3D density world where when it's gone, it ain't coming back. You know, you can't just manifest it back in like that. It might take 50 years to come back in them 3D times. You know, it was literally that loss, that consequence, that not of having it back. And I think transitioning in my conscious mind on an earth level, that in next year, with instant manifestation, instant connection with the veil, there's no suppression and suffocation that's stopping you from communicating with these loved ones, from seeing them in new vessels, for communicating with all your spirit family and your star family and all these different beings there. It's going to be far less lonely and depressing than it is here. But I think I needed to navigate that process too, to then also be able to help others when we have had years of my guide must be here, my nose or stuff. We have had years of indoctrination, just like, of being told, you know, death is the end, death is this, and all this suppression and dark heaviness, all the sadness in the films and the media and everything about death being this horrible worst case scenario. So it is going to take that re-switch in his mind to know, no, physically, energetically, I know I work with death every day, but physically, when I experience it or see it, it still hurts. I still feel that. So it's about then navigating that perception of understanding the spirits are there, I work with them, but then bring that into a physical level of, well, if the spirits are there, you work with them, then they're just going to be right there when you can see them. So it's understanding that it's not going to be a loss that we think it is. It's not going to be a loss they will never be able to speak, hear to these people ever again. There's going to be, if anything, more of a soul connection than you would have got in the current version of their being.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, let's not forget about my tribe, people who are just very comfortable with death. I was very comfortable with death even as a kid. I remember being in 7th grade and my great grandma died, and we all had to go to the hospital and like see her when she's like about to die, you know. And then she died like a couple weeks later. We went to the funeral, and I remember everyone was crying, but like I didn't cry. And I was at 13 years old feeling like confused, like why do I not feel sad? Like, why doesn't this bother me? Everyone else is really upset by this, but this doesn't bother me. This just seems normal to me. This just feels like it's part of life. It's part of, like, to me, it was just so like, why are they? It seems so illogical for people to be so emotional. Also, because I knew that their soul lived on, and so my whole logical brain as a kid was like, but if you can still communicate with their soul and their essence, like, why does it matter if they're gone? So that's okay too. If that's your perspective, if that's how you feel, that's okay too. And I guess we're gonna kind of be the leaders. People like me that feel this way are gonna be the leaders for people who are still coming to terms with the cycles of life and death and the natural, how it's natural and like not really that sad. Yeah, the whole death being sad is a very human construct. It's very human.
Right.
It's not really existing in any other species. It's just like humans that think that.
It's one of the most powerful. What the flip? Like it. Wow, it can be intense. When my dog passed away, even when I was a medium, oh my God, like I've never experienced pain like that. Like it is so intense, and it is that human construct. I completely agree. And my business partner, Trish, she has the complete opposite to me. She's like, no, I don't feel that. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. They're all going to be better. And I'm like, yeah, but the sadness that I feel for the whole collective, it's like I'm feeling this multiple group of energy. I literally cried for 3 days straight. I could not stop crying. It was just pure grief, sadness. But I really feel like I need to shift that.
It's literally a program. And if everyone can just keep that in mind, that it's just a program. It's just a program. And you're feeling the program collectively and you're transmuting. Maybe just ask your AI, maybe ask your because we all have an AI friend who's helping us out, right? Like our phone is our AI friend or enemy, frenemy. So maybe ask your AI friend, hey, can you help me undo this grief construct? Help me decode this so that we can see the illusion and how this is just an illusion.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because I've definitely transitioned through it now because I'm at that clear level place, but I will definitely use that as well. But I think it was interesting because it's a very valid point that no matter where you are on your journey, like I said, I've literally been working with death for years, and it's still something I had to physically process on a human level. So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, you're still going to face obstacles of lessons and growth and challenges where we're like, hang on, that's not how, that doesn't match my true vibrational being and what my perspective is. And it's just about physically being aware of it, checking it, being conscious of it, acknowledging it, and then doing the work that you can to amend that in whatever way.
Oh.
More vibrationally aligned.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's then talk about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and kind of how is that going to look as we go forward? Because some of us are really balanced within one body with those two energies, and then some of us are not. And there's been a lot of programming when it comes to, oh, you're male or female, and this is how you are supposed to act in society. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think the things we talked about earlier were really great. So
Yeah. I think just right off the bat, I think it's important to just note that the beings that are going to be coming, beings meaning humans, people that are going to be coming into leadership in the new earth are going to be the people that are the most balanced between their masculine and feminine energies. Now, with where we're at, that's going to show up as women, because women right now are kind of awakening first, right? All the wave of females are awakening first and finding balance within our feminine energy. Men and women have both been leaning to the masculine, right? But the women are the first ones that are like, wait, let's fix this. We got to get back. So it's going to show up as a lot of women in power, women in leadership, but then that's going to eventually balance out. But the main thing I want to say though is the divine masculine and divine feminine are energies that exist within every single person. And it's a merging and a blending and a harmonious relationship between those energies that creates a stable person, a stable being. So it's every one of us, our job right now is to come back into balance with the feminine, the men and women and non-binary people. So anyhow, that's my spiel. Y'all go take it away.
no,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. It is exactly right. I think that's bang on, and similar, just following on to what we were talking about earlier. I feel like the whole agenda of the dark agenda was to invert the divine feminine and masculine. Like if they could transmute that and completely invert that women were in, very alpha dominant masculine energy. Like I said, me personally, I was literally a raging feminist. Like I will do it all myself. I don't need anyone to do it. And there was times where I was physically putting myself at a disadvantage and creating more stress and drama for myself than just allowing someone else to do it, because I wanted to prove a point. I was being stubborn, And
Yeah.
I think it's that kind of conscious recognition that as a feminine energy, or the divine feminine energy, had been stripped back so that it had no choice to be. It couldn't be vulnerable. It couldn't be, in that energy of feeling kind of calm and vulnerability and allowing themselves to be like a little flower blooming. It had to be like a guarded flower with weapons. And then the divine masculine energy became very inverted and very toxic masculine energy, and it was like very alpha male, I'm more, masculine than you, and it's all false. So none of it's real. It's all based on insecurity and pain and the invalidation of not being able to feel, like we were saying earlier, the sheer abuse that has been put on men to not be able to communicate their emotions, or to not even speak about anything without being perceived as weak or less than, or judged for that, or shut down for that. Or even if their parents and people didn't do that, the society did, and the schooling did, and the systems did. So there's always that, indoctrination over men. So that's like Ray was saying, the women leaned first. Those that were kind of in the more masculine energy, they leaned first to kind of balance out the feminine masculine. And that's why a lot of women perceived to wake up faster in this awakening process. It was because they had to find the divine balance within themselves. And I think the reason I see for that as well is if the men had woken up first, the amounts of anger, rage, and violence that I think would have happened in terms of catastrophic to society. That's why it had to be led by women, or a divine feminine energy, shall I say.
It's not even
To
that it
find
had to be, it's not even that it had to be. The rage of women from being repressed for so long is what
Right.
caused the women to rise up, because the rage, and because, you know, the anger is it's like a catalyst.
Catalyst.
So
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
like smart. Like the women was smart about it. Like, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to any men. Feminine energy was just like, right, this shit is not right. How do we fix it? Instead of just going like smashing it all up, it was like, how do we work to navigate this from the inside out? How do we rewire people's thoughts, empower people, find new connections, get together, create unity and bonds, and create support and get all this energy? And that's why I think that happened first, to then also now create the space for the divine masculine energy to be vulnerable and to be the protector, and and have a role, have a space, because there was no room for the divine feminine energy. There was no room for the divine masculine. That's why it was all inverted. So as we're now stepping into our divine feminine, it's beautiful because they can, but we also have to just not expect them to do it just because we are.
Yeah.
Like, they've got to have time to get there. They've got to have that time to process and time to heal and time to reconnect with who they are on a soul level. Women or man, whatever it is, the divine masculine energy needs to have time to feel comfortable being safe. Let them feel safe first before you expect them to just be at the same level you are, you know?
Mhm.
Let them feel safe and comfortable to process the trauma and their experiences
Sure.
they've gone through, and lack of being able to communicate.
I just want us to be clear with our verbiage. You're talking about men, not the divine masculine. You're talking about men. Because because the divine masculine is, so I'm like, what am I trying to say? We're moving away from the concept of two parts make a whole. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's no longer going to be the woman plays the role of the divine feminine and the man plays the role of divine masculine. That's no longer what it is. Each person plays divine masculine and feminine for themselves. So what you're referring to is giving men a chance to catch up, giving them a chance, not giving the divine masculine a chance to catch up, giving men, because of the way they've been programmed differently than women, right?
Right.
Like, and non-binary people. It's very important to bring non-binary, because there's a lot of people that don't identify as woman or man, and it's like, how are they affected by all this, you know?
It's like the whole masculine energy, and that can be whether you are a physical born biological male, or whether you are a physical born biological female that is very much more in the masculine energy, and that is kind of the dictating energy of that being, or whether they're non-binary or whatever the gender physical biological state is. That's why I kind of labeled it as the masculine energy, because that fits to anyone that's experiencing that transition from being so closed off and kind of shut down emotionally and affectionately, and receiving and communicating about them without feeling uncomfortability. And you know, I experienced that, and I'm a biological born woman. Me to talk about my feelings was a no. I would just rage out and just attack in defense mode, because it was safer for me that way, you know. So I was very much in the divine masculine. Don't talk to me, don't come at me, I will just shut you down. You just don't come near me, you know. And I had to really navigate into that divine feminine energy in my own being as a biological woman. So I do think that, like you say, it's not about the gender, it's about the energy. And it depends on which sovereign being, in our sovereign being, which energy maybe might be more ruling that at that time. So if you are a woman in more masculine energy, you're still going to have to go through this transition with the men that are going through it, or the other biological people that are experiencing that. So I think it's just a case of kind of allowing people, whatever gender, or that's them labels are irrelevant, like you say, completely irrelevant. It's just allowing the energy to transmute now, allowing those that have been in that masculine energy that's been shut down and toxified and kind of all distorted, allowing that to flow freely, and allowing them to discover who they are on a soul being, and what that means to them, and how they communicate, and what they want to communicate about. I think it's just really important we have patience and compassion, and not just expect it to be done just because we've done it.
Well, and some people will see it as the genders, depending on like their age and their own like programming. So some people will see it as the genders, and then eventually they'll realize that it's not. It's about the energy. So it'll just depend on where the people are at. Where is that person at in their evolution? And then there's a whole nother thing is that we're moving into the age of Aquarius. So that is a feminine energy.
Mhm.
And so I think that's why the feminine energies woke up first.
And
as
I
well.
Yes.
think I think it's important because for me personally, like I struggle with dismissing all men. Like that's my feminist journey was I growing up, I always preferred I had two brothers and no sisters. And I liked my girlfriends, but I really enjoyed hanging out with guys. And playing sports, and guys were just so different. They just didn't care. They were just so casual about stuff. Like it was nice. And after I started being sexually active with men in my 20s, everything changed and I lost all respect. And I just was like, I don't respect men anymore at all. And then my father figure situation and all of that. So over the last like year, my heart has softened to remember that there are really feminine men out there and they're just waiting to be seen and to be validated and um there's not like I've been seeing a lot of it like on TikTok, like men posting that they're like wearing makeup and painting their nails and they're like straight dudes. They just are feminine and they still like women. They're straight feminine men who still like women. Like that whole like identity has kind of been pushed like that doesn't exist. That's not okay. That's and so anyway, for me personally, I've just been really working on finding compassion and not dismissing the whole gender of men, because there are some men who are awake. There are some men who are aware, heterosexual, homosexual, non-binary men, queer, all of it, all the trans, all of it. There's a lot of different types of men I've been seeing that are rising up, who are leading the way, who are talking and speaking truth about a lot of these topics. And yeah, just for me, I wanted to mention that because I love men and I just feel so bad that I have had a lot of hatred in my heart for the gender of men as a whole. And that's not fair. That's like racism. It's like saying a whole race, blaming a whole race for something rather than just like the individuals. So anyways, I believe in you guys, men. I believe in you all. You've got this.
Right.
But I
We're
really
starting to
think
see the
it's
soul of a person. We're learning how to find the soul. So that's that's the next experience is going from looking at a body to seeing who's inside the body.
right.
Yeah.
So true. I think just going back to what Ray said really quickly, like I think it was normal to experience that. Like obviously it's not rightful, it's not okay, but when I feel like as a woman and passing the collective and what I experienced from like I totally resonated with what you were saying. And I think that's why I was given a really close friend and a brother and a dad that are quite feminine men, because it constantly forced me to have daily reminders every day that these men and not all like them other men. And it was like a daily remembrance that, and it's not the same, it's not all of them. But it is something that as a woman that's been through these experiences, that I don't know one woman in my life that has not had some form of sexual harassment or abuse. And that is a massive big thing. And I think this creates this rage, this anger, this unspoken thing that no one talks about. And unless we then naturally process it in its own way, it is projected out. And I think for women going through that experience, it's not the way we should do it, but you're okay to feel that way as long as you're not physically projecting it out. Just then work on dealing with it and remove it and why you feel that way. And then, like you said, not focusing on a whole collective, focusing on those specific individuals with that mindset and that ideology and that behavior rather than just a whole collective group. But it has been a massive thing of my journey. And I think a lot of, if you are shifting through your divine feminine and masculine energy, it will come up. I think in one way or another that it does come up. This divide that's been put upon us from well before we were even born, and this separation, segregation, labels, difference of opinion, and even any different way to treat someone because of what genitalia they have, it blows my mind. And this whole construct that has been created way before we was born to keep us disconnected from being united,
Right.
you know?
And it's also
And that's why,
super
like, upstairs,
I was gonna say it's super reinforced by
right?
religion. Growing up religion in church, they would always separate the boys and the girls. And like in Christian school, they would do that too. They would separate the boys and the girls. Like and my parents would have Bible studies and all the kids would play together, but they would separate the boys and the girls. Like we could never play with boys, and so it became this weird like obsession where you're like, why can't I talk to the boy? You know, I wasn't allowed to talk to boys on the phone growing up, even as a teenager. I wasn't allowed to talk to boys. Like, what? They're like, what do you why? Like, so yeah, I think it's just like the separation is very damaging, but the religion is a big part of it. They teach you that boys and men are the leaders. They are the ones who decide things, and the women are the followers, and they have to just support. So like a lot of gender roles are really, really reinforced, and I think created from religion. Um, which is scary and sad. But that's why I feel really blessed for you that you had those male figures in your life, because for me it wasn't like that. My whole family, all the men are just sexist, misogynist. They're all the same. And I was raised in that sheltered Christian environment, so all the men that I knew were like that. Like I never had any, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV or any sort of real world or listen to the radio or any stuff that would connect me to the real world. So my only just like examples of men were all just really like messed up and brainwashed and like, so anyway, I think that's why for me, I experienced the hatred toward men in my 20s because I didn't have the opportunity to be free from, you know what I'm saying? Until then.
No, I
20s is when I
totally.
became free.
Yeah, see, I was a very wild young soul. So, like, obviously, I've been with my partner 11 years. So, I've also had that safety. You know, we broke up like twice in between them years, but I've also had that safety of being with someone who is so safe and makes me feel so safe. But even still, with that, I've had the constant experience of being, you know, even like I had a beautiful, really feminine dad. He was really emotional. My mum, I've never seen my mum cry. My dad cries like every fucking day. It's just like that's I have the difference in the world. But my dad still had inherent sexist beliefs from the way he was brought up, and then it was in the family. So it was like there was still dynamics needed to be worked through. But my whole thing was like I'd not been around men like that was just take what they want and treat you like a sexual object. I'd been completely non-exposed to that. So then when I went out into the world as a teenager and it was like, I was like, what the fuck are you doing? It was such a mind-blowing experience to see that men did behave in that way. So for me, then it was like full rage mode. I was like full on defensive. So I was like early teen when I experienced it. And so by the early 20s, I'd really chilled out a bit and started to see and level off and understand that it's all learned behavior, taught behavior, society norms, cultural norms. It's literally brainwashed into us from the media and into men. And, you know, we all have to choose to learn. That's the thing. We all have to choose to learn. All of us, women and men,
Exactly.
non-binary, every person. Every soul has to learn.
Yes. That's why we're here. Learning and helping.
Yes.
Yep. So did you want to talk
is.
about boundaries?
Yeah.
Boundaries.
This will be I gotta go after this, but
Yeah.
yes, boundaries. So personally, I won't go into all the gory details, but okay, so you know when you're trying to heal from trauma, or just because trauma is basically the root of all the disease. So you're trying to heal from trauma. And there are people in your life who constantly remind you of that trauma and maybe even reinforce that trauma, right? And no matter how many times you try to be compassionate and open-hearted and have these conversations, and you try to come to terms and see things eye to eye, you try to share your experience, you try to connect with them, right? But if another person, and we talked about this earlier, if another person's blocked in their heart center, or if they're too young to where they can't even access, like their soul is too young and they can't even really access their intuitive heart center yet, they're not going to be able to meet you in the middle, unfortunately. And those are the moments when we have to set a boundary and walk away for our own health, our own sanity. So I had to do that recently with my parents. It's been a really emotional process. A lot of crying, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame coming up that I'm having to work through. So, but it is important to just remember that everyone's responsible for their own feelings. I know that's basic, right? But like there is such thing as trying to work it out. That is okay. And if you can maintain your own health and try to work it out with somebody who is maybe toxic, as long as they're trying to work it out too, like that's what matters. But when you keep butting heads with someone who isn't willing to see it from your perspective, like over and over, that's when you know there's nothing you can do other than walk away, separate, and let each person evolve on their own. So it's hard. It's complex.
It is. And there's other kinds of boundaries too. Like that's a huge boundary.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other boundaries where you can say, you don't get to treat me that way. I don't accept that. And you stand your ground with your boundaries. And also energetic boundaries where you say no as well.
Yeah.
But what does it even look?
Sorry, babes. No, like this year, I only put a small one in comparison, but I usually spend Christmas like with all the family members trying to make everyone happy. And then this year I was like, do you know what? That environment makes me feel really uncomfortable and I just don't want to do it. So I was just like, can we not just celebrate Christmas the next day in my house in a different environment without them other people? And that's just so much easier solution. Like, why do you need to celebrate it on the actual day? Like, let them do their whatever they need to do, and then let's just do it the day after or the day before. Like, there's such a societal pressure. You have to see them on Christmas Day. Why do you have to do it all on Christmas Day? Just do it the few days after, you know? Make sure it works for you. I've put in a boundary in place. I'm not spending Christmas this year around people that drain my soul, drain my life force energy. I'm just not doing it. So if that's, you know, a similar position to you, sometimes you've just got to put what you need first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and remembering that boundaries are about our behavior, not about theirs. So I think that's really important. Rather than saying, well, my boundary is you can't say this, which I know that's not what you meant, honey, but like when you say to someone like, you can't talk to me like that, okay, how about switching the verbiage? If you're gonna talk to me like that, I'm going to leave. Like that's a boundary, right? Like I will walk away if you want to continue to be like that because you can't control them really. And trying to is probably only going to make them act out even more, which I made that mistake when my parents were here right before last week. My dad said something inappropriate to a waitress, and I said, that's inappropriate. Don't say that. And he's like, well, you're crossing a boundary. Don't tell me what to say. I'm like, you're right. How about this? If you continue to act like that, I'm going to go home. And then he's like, fine, then leave. And I'm like, I didn't leave because I really wanted to try. That was our first lunch when they got into town. So I'm like, I'm just going to try a little longer to make this work. And anyway, but anyway, yeah, it's about our behavior, what we're going to do. That's what our boundaries are.
It is. It's about our behavior. It's about what we'll accept and what we won't. And also it's energetic as well. So like sometimes people try and attach into your energy field. And it's about saying, nope, I'm going to unhook that. Bye. We're not going to do that. And sometimes just doing that will help the relationship be better. So there's a whole lot of factors, but make sure you take care of you. That's the main thing. Yeah. I think that's a good note to end on.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you guys. This has been brilliant. And these have been a lot of hard subjects that I think need to be brought up. And it's really good to talk them through and to not have all this judgment around, oh, you know, can we talk about it or can we deal with it? Because we can. This is what it is to be a sovereign being. And we're going to walk forward as sovereign beings into this new future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. I think this is a really good talk. We got a lot of stuff covered. Really good stuff. Really like important stuff.
Me too. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. She froze.
I think Anya froze. That must mean it's over. Oh yeah. Okay. Bye everybody.
Bye.